I love this. Like you can hear
This
yourself.
is good.
Sweet.
This is good. I'm way taller than you guys, so this is weird. All right. So, On the Bench, episode 1.
Awesome.
Sweet. What's been happening?
Cal, Lockie, Trent. Everyone look at your camera. Sick. All right. So, On the Bench, we're going to talk about projects we've done, different topics around film and media and production to give a little bit of an insight to the people listening at home. So, today's first topic is the difference between sensor sizes and size, and does it matter?
Cool.
So, Lockie,
Take it away.
can you tell me all about sensor size or what you know about sensors?
All right. Let's talk about how technical do we want to go with it? We'll just roll.
Explain it to me like I'm someone that's just about to go to film school.
Okay. The most important thing is to be able to recognize the different sensor sizes because size does matter, especially for what you want to get. And there's lots of different areas. I can't concentrate.
Bro, size matters, I swear.
Size matters. So yeah, if you're going to film school, the most important thing is that if you're trying to record professional stuff, there's a big difference between full frame sensors and smaller sensors like APAC sensors, which we don't need to get into the names and stuff, but basically the bigger the sensor, the more light is being projected onto that space, which means that you're getting a better quality picture from a few different technical aspects. If we're comparing it to film, 35 millimeter film is what your is the size you're getting in full frame.
It essentially translates to, for like people who don't really understand sensor sizes and whatnot, it's basically like a high resolution because you're going from like pixels per dot essentially.
Yeah.
You're getting like a high resolution up towards of like 6 to 8K rather than your standard 1080p, 2K to 4K.
Yeah.
It is like that, but it has nothing to do with resolution. So sensor size and resolution have completely two different things. You can have an iPhone sensor that is a 4K or even 8K sensor, but is
The level of
like
detail changes
is like
Okay.
less than a centimeter in size. So yes, by rights resolution wise, it is 4K because it's 4,000 or 382 by 2160.
But if you're comparing 4K of an iPhone to 4K of a Red cinema camera,
It's night and day difference because you've
Yeah.
got like a factor of like 16 in terms of size difference. In the last 10 years, there's been a resurgence of the full frame look because it emulates film better. And the only difference of like the major difference with full frame is that your focal lengths that you're putting on look different. So you get your nice 50 mil bokeh that you get in a 50 mil lens, but you're getting it at 50 mil, not your 75 that your Super 35 would be at. So you get to use cooler depth and cooler lenses and get that effect that lens has, but at a wider angle. So your 85, which has really, really sharp foreground, background separation, but you actually get a wider shot rather than having to deal with like really, really close shots.
Okay.
So like when you say, I've got a 16 mil lens on, if it's on a Super 35, it's actually closer to like a 50. I think it's the crop's 1.6.
Yeah.
It's a 1.6 crop. So it becomes you got to like kind of do a bit of mental math to figure out what your actual focal length is. So like this lens here is 9 mil, but it's on a micro four thirds. So it's actually closer to like 18 mil. I think it's it's 2 times crop on a full micro four.
Right.
So yeah, it just means that you gotta like when you're doing a lens selection, you got to figure out what you're actually going to use because it'll change, and if mentally you know what your focal lengths look like in different situations, it becomes a bit of an issue with us because we use sometimes full frame, sometimes Super 35, sometimes micro. If you've like got the shot in your head on a full frame sensor, like your 50 mil, that'd be fine. You throw it on that, and it's way more depth. It's like, whoa, what's going on? So.
Yeah.
And that's why ARRI were like 1080p sensors, Super 35 or 4K sensors for years, never went to full frame, and they just released a 4K camera in the RE35. It's their first 4K It's their first 4K camera in, I think, forever. Digital
Really?
First 4K digital camera. Like,
Yeah, and I think the other biggest point is for entry level, you're basically going to want to avoid full frame because you most likely are going to spend that much.
Yeah, I suppose
The
so.
price.
And also
Especially
the
in your first
software
camera.
that, like in that camera, the capability of what you're shooting is a bit higher than what you need just
Yeah.
to learn the basics.
Most of your entry level are APS-C or lower.
It is more forgiving though, full frame, because like in terms of the way the dynamic range works and things like that in those cameras, if you make a mistake, especially with your highlights, you get a little bit of wiggle room with coloring it. Like a lot of beginners shoot their friends' weddings and stuff like that, and there's a lot that can go wrong with exposure. But obviously the price point of full frame cameras, most people aren't going to be starting out with them.
What do you think the average jump is in price?
Well, between
it's
like
almost double from
like a
30.
JB Hi-Fi ABAC to
APS-C to Super 35 is almost double, and then it's
Sony's probably.
It's like full frame to Super 35, depending on the
Going
it depends on the camera
Going
system.
from like the hundreds to the thousands, really. Like,
yeah,
the
you're
jump.
jumping in thousands. But from Super 35 to full frame, it depends on what camera system you're using. Like the Red is Super 35 and starts, I think, 9,000 Australian. But you have the C70, which is also Super 35, which is about 9K. But you can buy a Sony A7R4 for like 3, and it's full frame.
Okay.
But it's not inherently better. It actually has a lot to do with the color science of
Yeah.
the company that made the sensor.
For reference, we use two Canon R5s, which are full frame mirrorless.
And they're
they
about
started about
5K. Yeah. So, yeah, and it actually comes down to like the actual company that's designing and making the sensor. I know Canon use CMOS sensors, but then put their own color science on it. Red, I think, use CMOS as well, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but they also have their color science. And the reason why you would use Red over Canon is because of Red's color science, not because of their sensor.
Okay.
And the reason why anyone that's won a film for Best Picture has used RE in the last 20 years is because of their color science.
Yeah.
And they're all still Super 35, unless you go to the higher end REs, which are actually 65mm, like medium format, which is actually just two Super 35 sensors put together.
We were talking about this earlier today when we were looking at the DJI Inspire 3's sensor and the colors, like the picture that it was getting, and how we were talking about that, like the raw image looks great, but it's the like in the color grade that really sells that camera
Yeah.
sensor, especially like for a drone.
The benefit of full frame is you get so much more to work with in terms of color. You actually you can sometimes even get like more than the visual spectrum of light. So it actually gives you so much more color to work with, so much more information. But also it's not the sensor size then as well. It's that it's records in raw format. So you're getting more data to work with.
And then going into like how that benefits our clients, especially when we're shooting indoors where there's corners and things like that with weird shadows, or there's lights that have conflicting color and things like that. We're able to manipulate the image a lot more, wouldn't you say, that than if we were shooting on a cheaper range of cameras. I know like our architectural stuff recently, color grading that and getting better at it.
Bit of a headache for you.
There was that one property that just like it was tungsten and then daylight just
Yes,
full on,
yes.
and I was able to fix it quite a bit.
The only reason you'll be able to fix that is because we shot in RAW.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you were able to fix your white balance in post.
Yeah.
If you were shooting on a lower range camera, you just couldn't do that. Or you'd have to bring lighting, which then costs even more money than what it costs just to use a better camera or a better camera system.
Yeah.
Especially on jobs like that where you don't have the opportunity to be a cinematographer and actually light your scene, where we have to be in and out within 2 hours. It's
You're moving
just not
around too much in the
possible.
space. You're capturing the whole house.
It's not possible.
We had another challenge was automatic lights. You'd walk down a hallway doing like a one take, and then one of the lights would go off,
Yeah.
or on another room, and you had to restart.
or the client is just like following behind you, turning lights off, even though you're not finished with the room. Or something.
Yeah, or you've got some photographer shooting flash photography in the room next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me. Yeah.
Luckily, we coordinate quite well with our photographers to rotate through the houses.
Rotate round. But yeah, so the big, like the massive benefit of having like the new Inspire, having a full frame camera on a drone just means when you're shooting in low light conditions, you're going to get just such crispy footage where unless you're a full pilot flying a massive drone with a massive payload to put a cinema camera on, you just can't get that level of detail in low light before. So now you can, which means camera matching aerial to ground is going to be so much more affordable.
Yeah.
Even though it's still like 25 grand comparatively to something else that was else on the market was like closer to 50.
Day to day, even shooting during the day, the massive drawback of the like dynamic range of the other drones is the trees, the shadows in the trees and stuff just turn into compressed like artifacts and things like that. You see it when you try to crop in.
Cheers. Thanks, Stoic. Please sponsor our podcast.
Work with us.
Please.
Like all round.
Yeah, and if you're shooting midday because you don't want shadows on your main house or subject or property or development, you just end up with parts that are shadowed are just black because of the difference in light. Where these new cameras, you're going to be able to keep your shadow data and your highlight data and just get these super crisp images. And then even going into mapping and photogrammetry, the more data you get in those applications, the better your scans are. So it has so many use cases, and it's really cool to see this new tech coming out.
And again, it reduces the amount of other gear you need to rely on.
Yeah.
To shoot. Like even if we're shooting something like an industrial or a car ad or something, we don't need to rely on particular lighting or anything like that on closer shots because you're getting all the light you need just through the sensor.
And you can shoot later into the day, which means you don't have to do multiple production days, which saves costs, saves time.
Yeah.
You're getting a better image, so you don't have to do as much work in the post, and the cost of colorists is always going up. So it's just less post-production work.
It's a big step up for aerial photography and videography. Be interesting to see if there's any competition that comes out to compete with the new Inspire, because DJI are kind of heading the market.
There is a Sony one that's out that's using like a Sony A7 IV as the camera.
Drone.
Yeah, there's a Sony drone that's been announced.
Is that like the ones that fly kind of vertical and they have the Sony setup looking down? You seen those orange ones?
Yeah, I have seen that. But they use it. That's mainly for photogrammetry. It's using a Sony sensor, but it's there is a cinematic drone from Sony, but I haven't heard too much about it yet. It'd be interesting to see, like from on the spec sheet, it's like 61 megapixels full frame. It's pretty cracked, but I've heard the flight experience isn't great on it.
Right.
Whereas know with DJI, you're going to get a good out of the box experience.
Yeah.
Flying from their Mavic Mini all the way up to their Inspire, the only thing that changes is it's a little bit more heavier to fly. And just the Inspire's form factor that it raises up so you get no obstructions is just sick, because if you're flying like really complex moves, you can end up with like propellers in your shot, which just ruins your shot. Cool.
Yeah, even on the Mavic 2, like you'd think they would have gotten rid of that by that time, but
no, it still exists.
Speaking of which, we got if you look behind you on the table there, Cal. Yeah.
ND filters.
We got the NDs.
ND. So topic number 3, awesome. I think this is.
When do these come in?
This morning. Sick. So NDs. Cal, can you tell me what are NDs and why will you need to use them?
Neutral density filters, they essentially create a polarizing effect on the lens, I think.
So basically a pair of sunglasses.
Yeah, kind of like scattering a lot of the light to filter it, and it stops you from having a lot of blown out highlights and whites from sunlight. It's like putting sunnies over your drone's lens.
Basically putting sunglasses on your drones, on your camera.
And they go up. I'm not sure how the scale works. It goes from 16, 64 to 56. You can get other
I believe it's a logarithmic
scales.
Scale. I'm just going to get Jamie to look that up. I'll just look it up now. I believe it's a logarithmic scale.
Yeah. But with a lot of our aerial photography of houses, white tin roofs, solar panels all reflect a lot of sunlight.
And also being on the coast, the glare that comes from water and
Yeah.
things like that, it reduces that.
ND filters cut through the initial reflection off water, so you can actually see through the water better, and it also gets rid of any glare, especially in the mornings. If you're shooting on the east coast of any country, a sunrise shot just gets wrecked by the glare off the window, off the glare off the water.
If Ray-Ban made a ND filter, I'd invest.
Yeah. It's surprising that these don't come with the drone automatically, because it's kind of essential.
Yeah, definitely.
I've already had plenty of use cases with the new ones having needed it and not having it. So
Yeah.
Just trying to find the
chuck them in the kit.
The other benefit of ND is it also means you can stop down. So if you want to do like a long exposures during the day to get blur effects or something.
And you can do those drones now too. How good is that?
Yeah.
It's just so stable and still.
Yeah, so to if people don't know, with shutter speed, the higher your shutter, the longer the sensor is opened up to the light, so the more light it lets in, so the brighter your image looks. If you want to take something that's longly exposed during the day, you need to darken the light that's coming in. So you use something like a 256 ND filter to stop the light from penetrating all the way through. Cool. So they're cool.
Especially similar to, we have an adapter on our Canons that we tend to use with an ND, and so that's also quite handy when you're on job sites like I was today. You've got sun constantly peeking through the clouds, and that's a quick adjustment for your exposure of the image, instead of having to play with all the settings when things are happening quickly and you need to move around and stick to a certain ISO or aperture. And because everything's kind of moving quickly, you got to stay at a high shutter speed as well. So having the NDs to quickly change your exposure is really handy.
Yeah, and even if you want to keep your high f-stop, so you've got that separation between your subjects, you can be midday shooting f2, 2.8 without having to worry. Always f2.8. That's how you get that nice cine style.
It'd be nice to see DJI put a inbuilt ND filter, variable ND.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, actually. I'm sure with the new systems coming out, they'll probably make some sort of adapter. It'd be cool if they did an electronic one, so it wasn't stops, it was like variable.
Yeah.
Which you could order.
It just rotates like on a motor inside.
No, all the electronic ones are like a glass that they pass electricity through, and it changes the polarity of the pixel. It's pretty cool. It changes like the polarity of the actual material in the glass, and it like changes it. So I know the FX6 and some other cameras have variable ND, electronic variable NDs in them, and that's how they do it. So you can be like f2 at 100 shutter. And just go from inside to outside, and the ND will change to make it look sharp. Like that's
so good.
I just wish Sony's colours were better.
Good low light.
Good low light. Colours still suck. Canon fanboy over here.
Yeah, we've constantly debating if we should switch to Sony for the cinema range, but
not to get too technical, but in terms of the colours, I thought Canon was perfect with its tint, but after working with those R5s, they put magenta in like Sony does. Like that was the main problem with my Sony A7, is the magenta on the, especially like the midtones, was shocking. But Canon's a little bit better, but there's still magenta for some reason.
Yeah, there is. I find Canon is heaps better at taking the magenta out of skin tones though. Like Canon's skin tones and blues and greens are really good, where Sony always would like pump your greens way too hard and would make skin tones like really magenta-y, and it was just really difficult to, unless you had like proper decent lighting, it was just so hard to make it look right or color accurate, especially in the world of architecture and construction where you're trying to replicate what's true to life. It's so difficult to do.
Can you make multiple picture profiles in the Canon?
You can. You can change them, yeah. We probably should calibrate our sensors.
Do like a test of different lighting and calibrate to.
Yeah, you can. Like we can calibrate them. You can have
take
different
time.
setups, but yeah, it's something we probably should do.
The Mini 3's been pretty impressive with their tint as well and their white balance. It's been almost spot on.
Yeah, I think from my understanding, the Mini 3 was built around the idea of that people are going to use it to take pictures of landscapes. So blues, greens, browns are like dialed right in their color science.
We can get away with pumping the greens if we need to, because most of our work's outdoors.
Yeah, and people like green glass. green grass and
Green
blue
grass,
skies. That's what we
Pretty
love.
easy to fix if your grass is brown, so hit us up.
We love green grass.
If you don't have any grass, don't come to us.
We can still change it.
Yeah,
There's a
we
lot of
for a price.
a lot of work going into reproducing and virtually staging property and fixing grass, all types of stuff. A lot of images get retouched more than you may think before they get out to the public. Though that's another good talking point actually. In real estate, you can't do anything that may mislead people that are wanting to buy. So you can't like get rid of a big hole in the ground or a big patch of grass that's dead. You can do stuff like, oh, it hasn't rained in 6 months. It's rained. Like we took photos now, but since before it got launched, it did rain and the grass has gotten better. You can change that, but like you can't Photoshop power lines out or anything like that because it's misleading to the advertisement.
Yeah, because you're selling it, trying to.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's false advertising if you do it the other way.
Food ads, they used to use like PVA glue and stuff for milk, and
They still do. They use it for cheese.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
There
that's
you
how you
go.
get like the really stringy cheese and your.
And they're
your
still allowed
pulls.
to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't they have to use real food though? Like the actual food has to be.
Yeah, or it's like they use like a lot of mozzarella when it should be like cheddar.
Right. Yeah.
It's like with most fast food companies when they have their big burger ads, you know how they always look so much bigger and it's like they're spilling out of the buns because one side of the bun's practically empty and it's just the face in the camera is just
And
fake.
it's on like a.
They literally
it's on
stick
like a
seeds
little,
onto the bun.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen them with the
So
tweezers.
bad.
put in the
It's
seeds.
like a V because they push it all to the front.
If you haven't learnt by now that the burger ads are incredibly misleading, then
Yes.
Got more things to worry about. Cool.
What did we do this week?
What did we do this week?
editing.
Lots and lots of editing.
Lots of rendering.
Render times.
Shout out, Brooke.
Yeah, I guess that's like another thing that people may not realize. Rendering can take not a lot of time and can also take an exponential amount of time.
Especially when you have other video projects to work on. Unfortunately, you can't render and simultaneously edit another project yet.
Yeah, well, that's the benefit of having remote editors like our station behind me that we can force to render whilst we're working on other projects, and having I guess that's another point, having a server that's local that all machines are connected to so we can move them around, because sometimes like my computer won't be rendering, I'm just doing emails, so I could render something in the background whilst the other editors continue to do stuff on their machines.
The server is like one of my favorite things about one of the systems here. Previous to this job, like no other place I've worked at has had the server. And even though you say it's kind of crude, like the way we manage client data is like amazing. We don't have to hand out hard drives to anybody. It's just all on the server. You know, in terms of our editing platforms that we use, it goes straight onto that no matter whose machine we're working on. It makes it a lot more streamlined, a lot faster. And we can fix things if there's something wrong with a client project. Being able to fix it from different machines and things like that just makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and even being able to take it with you and fix on the fly. Like we've been traveling in the past, like interstate, and you might have something come up and you can just jump on. If you've got the files locally, you can just switch it and change it. And a lot of our proxies are on like our Dropbox, so you can just download them and change a project and then get the boys to render it when they're back in house. It's pretty cool. It's been like a long journey to try and do that, but data is probably the most important thing in this industry. If you have bad data, you're gonna have bad images or bad quality. Like having good data governance and data security and management of data is probably the most important thing to have. So that's why we have the 3-2-1 backup and a fast NAS that all of our data goes onto, and that's what we work from, and it's all governed properly and everything's done up to spec. Because if something goes wrong with the data, we lose weeks of work. So it has to be right, and clients expect that.
Exactly. It's like, even though it makes things a little more complicated, it's getting it all set up. It's just what's expected, regardless of how much effort you put in or how much time we have to manage it all. Like, it's just expected, and having a system where it all flows just makes so much easier.
And from a client's point of view, they can come back in a year, 2 years, 3 years time and go, hey, have you still got that data? We want to do something different with it. Or can you re-edit this, or can we pull this down and create a new edit? And we can turn around and go, yep, no worries, give us a day, we'll get it off our archive, and we can have it straight up and running within like 24 hours, which is just such a benefit, especially just data in 21st century is so important. So if anything you've captured that is quality, you can just keep reusing it and reusing it and reusing it, which just saves you money in the long run. Cool. This has been the first episode of On the Bench. It's going to be a regular podcast with us at Hill to Wear, probably every 2 weeks, I'd say at this point. I don't think we're going to be able to do it every week. It's going to be a 2-week catch-up. Might end up being pushed to a month. We'll see how busy we get. But if you have any questions we'd want to cover or anything that you might want us to talk about on here, please let us know by DMing us on Instagram. Cheers.